considering how important the drums has been to me growing up, and even today, even without regular practice, it's still something that's on my mind every day. I think that I deserve to exercise that part of my creativity.
Hello, my name is Eline Perez and you're listening to Are You an Artist? Today's episode is with Louis Grant, and it's about music supervision, playing drums, and contemporary jazz. Louis has been a wonderful guest. I learned a lot from him, so I'm sure you'll have a fantastic time listening to his story and diving into the world of music. Dear Louis, when I first met you, I mentioned the podcast and you seemed intrigued. I've been eager to interview you for months, and after many cancellations, the day has finally come. You're a drummer with over 10 years of experience in the music industry. As a music supervisor, among other roles I can't quite recall. You always come through with the best recommendations. I've discovered many amazing artists from all over thanks to you. And on top of that, you're a fantastic cook. So the first question I'll ask is, Louis, are you an artist?
I would say, yes, I am an artist. And I think that everyone is an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in all aspects of our life, we create. For example, when I'm not making music or working around music, I cook. I cook every day. I feel like my cooking is an art form.
Yeah, it definitely is.
The way I move my body during the day in the gym, on the yoga mat, that's an art form. So yeah, I believe everyone is an artist.
And have you always believed that, or?
I've always felt it. I haven't necessarily thought deeply about a response to this question, but I feel creativity around me and I feel artistic expression in the people that I interact with. So yeah, I guess to some degree.
And I guess when you were growing up as well, because your parents are quite in the arts.
My mum was a ballet dancer, so I was surrounded by movement and music growing up.
Classical music.
Classical music. My dad loves Motown, so I listened to a lot of funk music growing up. My older brother was a DJ.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we collected CDs together. Yeah, very artistic family.
And when did you start to play the drums?
I started the drums around 10.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, I was dabbling with the piano, clarinet, but the drums was really my true calling.
Were you eating the piano?
Eating the piano?
Hitting
the piano. I was really young when I learnt the piano, probably about 5 or 6. I only did it for a couple of years, and I remember wanting to quit because my teacher made me sing one day, and I didn't think that that was a very cool thing to do.
Okay.
So I quit in a rage and moved on to the next.
What did you sing?
I can't remember. I was so young.
Trauma.
It was when you do music theory, I recall having to sing as part of the exam, and I never really aligned with that.
Okay. And then you studied science, social science?
Social science, yes.
Why?
My first essay, ironically enough, the question was, is social science a science? So similar to this podcast.
So
are
is
you an
it?
artist?
I have a friend who would say no.
Yeah, I had a lot of people around me at university that said no. Everyone used to mock me by saying that what I was studying was what they would read in their recreational time. But I loved it. I was incredibly interested in politics and psychology. So I chose that degree pathway because I got to explore all kinds of, political science and social psychology and dig into some weird and wonderful corners of society. But I did that knowing that I would never work in that industry, I always wanted to work in music.
Okay.
And more specifically, I always wanted to work in sync, which is this corner of the industry that I find myself in.
Mm-hmm.
So my studies were really just for intrigue, for life experience. But the intention was always to get a job in music the moment I finished with my studies.
And would you keep practicing when you were studying or not as much?
Practicing the drums, yeah, absolutely. So in my late teens, I was in bands, and then throughout university, I collaborated with a couple of multi-instrumentalist friends and jammed a lot. I would come back to London a lot, and I started working in music whilst I was still studying, actually. And so I had kind of the entry point to continue my musical expression whilst I was studying social sciences.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
It was.
And then how did you find your first job?
I interned. Like many people in the music industry at that time, I did an unpaid internship, which I don't believe happens too much anymore, but that was my foot in the door. I interned for a music supervision company that specialized in advertising.
Mm-hmm.
They were renowned for being one of the best about. So I not only learnt the trade on the job, but also was exposed to the wider industry, and I was introduced to a lot of people. And one of those introductions turned out to be the record label that I went on to go and work for 5 years after I graduated.
Oh, wow.
So I had like a really nice fluid entry to what is renowned to be quite a tricky industry to break into.
Okay. Do you know why it's renowned to be tricky?
Because a lot of people want to work in it.
And it's cool, yeah.
Especially sync, this kind of area of music where you're the bridge between the music industry and the film and television industry. You're either working on behalf of the filmmaker to select the music.
Yeah, how does that work? Like, do you have both of sometimes you choose music that's already out there and sometimes you have commissions?
Yeah. So there are lots of different avenues that you can go down. I was working with composers to create bespoke work. I was searching through record label and publisher back catalogues to find the right music, and production music libraries where music is specifically created for film and TV. On the other side of the bridge, where I now find myself at, is on the rights holder side, where I am representing the interests of the songwriters, the recording artists, the rights holders, and finding placements for the music that I represent within film and TV. So I'm almost on the other side of the phone to when I was a music supervisor, when I was selecting the music, representing the interests of the filmmaker. Now I once again represent the interests of the musicians.
Well, which is great, I guess, because you can understand where everybody's coming from somehow because you've worked with both. So...
Absolutely. I think any experienced person within this corner of the industry would ideally have exposure on both sides of the phone.
Okay.
I think that it's really important to work and represent the interests of the artists and the songwriters, because there's so much thought and often anxiety around where their music is placed. The last thing that you want is to have your reputation damaged by
the wrong advert.
Yeah, like think about like what happened with the Trump campaign in the US, like how all of the musicians were furious that he would use their music to support his campaign trail when he was speaking in public. He would utilize the works of artists without their consent, which in the context that he was doing is legal, but the artists were understandably furious about the alignment of their art with his political ideology and messaging. So, take that in the world of advertising. Artists think deeply about where their music is used, like what is the footprint of the brand that is wanting to use their music? Is that a good placement of their music? Will that support their ethos as an artist? Like, these are all questions that you often have to have quite in-depth conversations with when the opportunity for a music placement comes about. It's the same with film and TV, like, would a Christian rock band want their music placed under a scene where kids are doing drugs? No, probably not. There's a lot of intricacies and a lot of thought that goes into how music is placed in these broader contexts, because when the artists are creating, oftentimes they're not thinking about, they can't be thinking about things that are outside their control like this. When they're creating, they're just creating a piece of work that means something to them, is their way of expressing themselves to their audience or even just to themselves. So when all of these potential opportunities come after the fact, there's a whole internal conversation and sometimes dilemma that goes on with the artists. And yeah.
So when you live your life, when there is no music around, do you hear music? Because you're so surrounded by that. So
yes, I do actually. And I'm tapping all day. It's one of the issues of being a drummer without a drum kit set up in their home, is that there's rhythm in everything in life, and I'm often keeping time on my knees, with my fingers, with my toes, very subtly. So I'm doing it right now.
So if someone is speaking to you, you're tapping the rhythm of how they speak? Or
no, I'm playing it right now. I'm playing in a completely different world to how we're speaking.
And you told me you maybe wanted to go back to be in a band in the future?
Yeah, I would love to. I think my career supporting music and supporting talent has inadvertently inhibited me from being able to invest the time and energy that I would want to as a drummer. It's always taken a backseat in my adult life. Just time and space. Like, my work takes up a lot of my mental capacity, and then my social life takes up the remainder. And I live in a city, London. Like, if I set up my drum kit here at home, then there would probably be a fair few complaints. So playing drums is time consuming and an expensive endeavor, because I would have to hire studio space. That said, I am very keen to start an artist project, rather than, in recent years I've been supporting other artist projects by contributing my drums, but it's been, like, again, not a priority. It's happened few and far between. So I think that by starting a band and maybe finding a space that I can use consistently, it's one of the missing links in my life, considering how important the drums has been to me growing up, and even today, even without regular practice, it's still something that's on my mind every day. I think that I deserve to exercise that part of my creativity.
Yeah. How do you learn to play the drum?
I feel like with every instrument, but especially with drums, keeping good time is something that you either have, or you have the ability to have, or you don't. And I feel privileged enough that from the outset I could keep good time. That's the foundation of drums. If you can keep good time, like, you listen to popular music, and the drum patterns typically aren't complicated. It's just all about keeping good time and your feel. And then the rest is kind of an added bonus. So the other side of the learning how to play drums was finding a teacher that you relate to and align with, and that you're, receptive to learn from them. And I was, lucky enough to be introduced to a great teacher who taught me how to utilize my ability to keep good time in a way that has allowed me to collaborate with some great musicians and feel like I can sit in that world.
I'm very ignorant about drums. I feel like you have a drum kit, but you can kind of add stuff or remove things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So my drum kit is incredibly minimal. I have a jazz kit, so it's quite small.
Okay.
And then I have some beautiful cymbals that are like my babies. I got them in my late teens. And I like having a stripped back setup. I think that you're going back to the point where a lot of a drummer's contribution oftentimes is simple. Simple yet effective. I think that the best way to do that is with a stripped back kit. It also allows you to explore the different sounds that you can make from one drum, from one cymbal. It's a very creative way to play the drums.
And to transport, because when you have to play a gig,
Totally, yeah.
How does it work? Like, can you kind of do it by yourself, or do you always need to have like
you have to have a car, yeah. You can't really take drums on public transport. But typically when you play gigs or you go to rehearsal spaces, the foundations of the drums will exist in that space already. The bass drum, the toms, all the hardware, so like the cymbal stands. And so the things that you would contribute are called your breakables. And the snare drum and the cymbals are the most identifiable instruments on a drum kit. So you can bring your snare drum and your cymbals to a gig or to a studio and it will sound like you. You'll be able to play as you play at home with the remainder of their kit and then your breakables. Cool. So it's like an easier way of not having to cart your kit everywhere.
Yeah. And when someone wants you to play for them, how does it work? Would they just make you listen to what they have and then you can kind of improvise from there? Or would they have like, how do you call it, like a score?
It can happen in any number of ways. When I was younger, I used to read charts, which are less of like traditional manuscript as you'd see with like tuned instruments, but more the structure of the music. So you could see how many bars you'd play one pattern for, and then a fill that happens at the end of that sequence, and then another number of bars that you'd play another pattern, and then a fill at the end of that sequence. So it's kind of like a guide, but not manuscript in that sense. So that's one way, but I typically would improvise. I would learn the structure of music beforehand, and then I wouldn't require any kind of like notation or reading. I could just sit down, improvise, or play what had been pre-discussed. Typically it is it's more improvised. I think that with the drums, more so than any other instrument, you're given a lot of freedom to improvise. It's actually one of the reasons why I was so drawn to the drums. So I think a lot of what you contribute as a drummer is flexible.
Okay.
You don't really have to be, on the money exactly as it needs to be.
So you have some freedom.
You have some freedom, yeah.
Which I guess then allows you to kind of be yourself and different from other drummers.
Yeah, it's a very expressive instrument.
So interesting. Because you hear it all the time, but you never really think about the drums somehow.
I think about the drums all the time.
Did it happen to you? I heard a podcast about a band and one person got very angry because someone lost the rhythm at some point and it was an important recording or whatever. Did that happen to you?
No, I've forgotten the structure of songs and gigs before.
So what do you do then?
Which is super awkward. you just get on with life because not ever, like, nobody is perfect.
Yeah.
But keeping good time is like, once you've put the hours into practice, it would almost be more difficult to not keep time than to keep time.
Okay.
I think that, so I've never played in band setups where there've been like a lot of electronic instrumentation. I think in those instances, when you're playing to a click, it's more important to be like absolutely on the money, like the same BPM the whole way through. When you're playing in like a live band setup, your feel is good time. So they do slightly differ, I guess, but I feel like I keep good time all the time. Yeah.
That's good. And yes, actually, a question I wanted to ask you. I'm curious about how you feel about electronic music, because it's more and more present now that people can generate drums and a lot of different instruments via computers. How do you feel about that?
I love electronic music. I think it's brilliant. I think that in an era where so much has been done in terms of songwriting, and, everything is a derivative of everything. So electronic music or electronic instrumentation and composition, I think, is interesting because it's newer. It hasn't had hundreds, if not thousands of years like more traditional acoustic instruments have had. I think that you can do the most weird and wonderful things with electronic instruments. I love ambient music. It's one of my go-to genres. That, you could have like orchestral ambient music, but like nothing cuts as deep as, beautiful soundscapes and worlds that are created using technology. Which takes you into another place. That's something that only a computer can really do to the level that ambient musicians do.
Have you ever written a song
Yes.
for people then, or?
For myself, yeah, contributed to a lot of music with people. So when you're in the studio, everyone's presence is a contributing force. Like even as a drummer playing an untuned instrument, I think that my contributions to the songwriting are of value. Perhaps they're not quite as renowned or iconic as a top line melody or an amazing chord progression on the guitar, but I think that the contributions that the rhythm section bring to a song shouldn't be sidelined.
Yeah.
And there's, the way that music makes you feel. I think oftentimes the rhythm section is quite profound in impacting the overall atmosphere of a composition, of a piece of music.
What types of music do you like to listen to?
So I mentioned ambient music. That's a go-to of mine because I love how it takes me into a completely different space. I feel like I experience life differently depending on the tones and the drones and the soundscapes that kind of come together and create a body of ambient work. I love contemporary jazz. I think, especially in London, the contemporary jazz scene is, throughout my adult life, it's been so unbelievably exciting and beautiful to be witness to and part of. I think I've never seen such a happy subculture. Everyone is so friendly. And
how would you describe contemporary jazz?
That's a good question.
In very simple words, but it's the first time I hear the terms, so that's why I'm curious.
I wouldn't pigeonhole it by kind of defining it in perhaps the way that you're asking me to define it, but I mean, it's obviously jazz that's created in the modern day. Much of it is quite up-tempo, very Afrobeat inspired, but it's pretty diverse. Like, I think that contemporary jazz, to me, walks a really nice line of asking questions and being different and trying something new, but also being very accessible and approachable and universally enjoyed. Like, I think it's why it's having such a moment, definitely in the UK, but also, you know, in the US and around the world. I think because it is equally as incredible and the musicianship is like highbrow, but also approachable and enjoyable to people that don't have any music vocabulary, you know.
Yeah.
Other genres of music, I love hip hop. The storytelling within hip hop and the sampling of old records within, you know, the production, I think is really cool. I grew up around, or I listened to a lot of heavier rock music when I was younger, a lot of screamo, metalcore. So that kind of informed a lot of my musical taste, especially in like my mid-teens. Like my early bands were like quite heavy hitting hardcore bands. I love indie music. My background was working for independent labels, and yeah, I love the beauty of simple stripped back music. Yeah.
So maybe now is the time for recommendations. So it could be artists you work with or you admire or
Sure. An artist that I worked with back in the day who I'm going to see again on Wednesday at the Alternet is one of my favorite artists, a guy called Rival Consoles. Yeah, I worked with him at the very beginning of my career. I think that his music, I mean, talking of that, those kind of like electronic worlds and how it can take you into a different space and ask just enough questions, but also be accessible enough that you can enjoy without being, you know,
a music nerd.
A music connoisseur.
Yeah.
Rival Consoles is up there with the best of the best, in my opinion.
Any other one?
Sure. I mean, it's no secret that the best drummer in the London contemporary jazz scene is Yussef Dayes. He's become an icon. I think that he's a huge inspiration. As a London-based drummer, I look up to him. Another band that I'm really into at the moment is called Men I Trust.
I think you made me listen to it.
Quite possibly. It's been on repeat for the last few months.
You have obsessions sometimes and you keep listening to the same song or...
Yeah, I think everyone does. I think that we all go through periods of just deep alignment with an art form, and music's a really easy one to do that because you just find something that you really connect with and then you binge it. And the best thing about binging music is you don't get bored of it. Like, you know, when you binge food sometimes, like one particular food, you get bored of it, or, you know, you watch the same movie 6 times, you get bored of it. With music, that doesn't really happen, does it? You can, like, I have friends that have listened to the same album rotation for their entire lives and don't get bored of it. It's a shame because there's so much good stuff out there, but I think that similarly to how much of music is repetitive by nature, like it's constructed in a repetitive way, I think as humans we love the idea of consistency and repetition. Goes the same with like what you're listening to, the playlist that you stick on. You know that you align with that. You know that it takes you to a place that you want to be taken to at that moment in time. So you repeat listen to it.
When I first met you, you mentioned that you were also giving conferences sometimes.
Yeah. So in my previous job, I was lucky enough to work for a company that was known internationally, and I was selecting music for their content. So naturally, conference organizers were interested in having me come and contribute, talk on a panel, and then consume all of the music that they were showcasing for consideration for projects that I would perhaps work on in the future. So yeah, I got to travel quite a lot whilst I was doing that role, talking on panels around the world. All these music conferences are really like so much fun. They're so cool. It's a really lovely balance of them wanting you to experience their city you're a guest in their city, all the locals, all the agents, all the local artists, all the people that know what's good want to take you to experience what's good. So you get dragged around in the best way possible from show to show, from restaurant to restaurant.
Where have you been?
I went to Brazil. I spoke on Brazil Music Summit, which was in Sao Paulo. And then we went to Recife for another music conference just the 2 weeks before Carnival. So all of the Carnival celebrations had already begun. All of the locals were already out in the streets, or the dress rehearsals were as if it was already Carnival, but without the tourism and without the rammed streets yet. I have been to several Canadian cities. I've been to Montreal many times. There was a weird and wonderful music conference on Prince Edward Island, which is a tiny island off of the east coast of Canada. That was a pretty unique experience. I've spoken on panels in Bulgaria and the Netherlands. Yeah.
Would you get to meet artists from there then?
All the time.
That's so
That's
cool.
the point.
Yeah.
They literally want you to meet everyone.
Wow.
Because as a music supervisor, the potential that you have to elevate a musician's career by offering them an additional income stream, you know, finding a placement of their music in the content that you're working on is one of the best ways for them to make money in this day and age of, you know, streaming obviously causing issues from like a compensation point of view. Live becoming more expensive.
Oh, yes.
With, you know, the cost of travel and visas. Music licensing is becoming so much more of a lifeline for artists and songwriters. And if you look at, you know, the opportunity for your music to be placed, like, I don't think society has ever created so much content before. That we're in the era of content.
Yes.
So there's a lot of opportunity to find music placements in all of this content.
Wow. Random questions of the end. Do you believe in talent?
Yes.
Do you like to go to the supermarket?
I love going to the supermarket, yeah. Laps of honor before I go to the checkout.
If you could have dinner with anyone, alive or dead, who would it be?
James Brown.
Why James Brown?
The mark that he made on music and the importance of rhythm in his songwriting, I just really connected with. I grew up listening to and drumming to his music every day. He also is renowned for being a really divisive character. I'd be quite intrigued to experience his manner. But I guess they say don't meet your heroes. So perhaps it's a good thing he's dead.
If you could live a parallel life, what would you do?
The thing is, I really like the way that I live my life. So I think my parallel life would be similar to how I'm living, but without working. I would tend to my allotment, have a beautiful Dalmatian, have a soundproof studio with my drum kit in my home. I would live by the beach.
Where?
Location-wise, I don't know. To be decided.
In the UK or somewhere
no,
else?
No, heat. I need sunshine.
Yes.
I would cook on open fire. I wouldn't wear shoes.
That's a goal. Thank you so much, Louis. That was great.
Thank you for having me.